And now, WWAX Productions proudly presents The Spotlight with Justin Hollywood. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Spotlight. I'm your host Justin Hollywood, and today I am here with James Caleb Kitchens. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. I'm glad to be here.
So, James, how'd you get into wrestling and what made you choose the business?
Well, that's definitely a long story, but I guess my earliest memories of being introduced to professional wrestling, really falling in love with wrestling, would have been when I was a kid, probably about 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there. And just I used to watch it with my dad. My dad was a huge Hulk Hogan fan, and so we used to watch WCW all the time, and that's where I really got into it. Was a huge fan of Diamond Dallas Page, but I liked a lot of the different performers in WCW: Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero. That's where I was first introduced to like Rey Mysterio and guys like that, and so that was really cool to see those guys later on end up in WWE and different places like that. So I think that's probably my earliest time I remember really getting into wrestling, and then it just kind of went from there. Naturally I followed it more and more, and just really began to respect it as an art form. And then from there, I mean, the rest is just history.
Besides Diamond Dallas Page, who were some of your favorite wrestlers growing up?
Oh man, I was a big Chris Benoit fan. Huge fan of Chris Jericho. Once I never watched WWF as a kid, but once I actually got into WWF, The Rock was my favorite. I was a huge fan of The Rock. I really liked his promos. They were entertaining. I liked the intensity that he had. Let's see, I also like Kane back in the day, not really so much anymore, but was a really big fan of Kane. Shane McMahon, still a huge Shane McMahon fan.
What were some of your favorite moves in wrestling?
Oh man, so listed Diamond Dallas Page as my childhood favorite, so I definitely would have to say the Diamond Cutter would be at the top of that list. Also ended up liking Randy Orton later on because it was his finish. I've always been a huge fan of the Muscle Buster, a huge fan of Samoa Joe as well, so that kind of goes hand in hand together. I've also always really liked the pedigree, used it as a finish myself, and just always really liked that move. I thought it was really unique, and you don't see it used a lot of places, I guess, because it's Triple H's finish, so you don't see it used a whole lot, and so especially on the independent scene, it's tough to find a move that you're not going to see in every YouTube clip. So that one's definitely unique, and so it's always been one of my favorites.
That's something you and I can agree on, because actually that's my finishing maneuver as well.
Yeah, man, it's one thing that I find is that a lot of guys are nervous to take it because I guess they're not sure the proper way to take the move. So you do run into that a little bit, but once again, I think you can attribute that to the fact that you don't see it a whole lot.
What do you think of Seth Rollins using the pedigree?
I think it's great. I didn't really like his version of the curb stomp. I didn't think it made sense. Because in order for his opponent to sell the move, they kind of have to launch themselves up off the mat, and it just kind of, I don't know, it was way too, it breaks the illusion a little too much for my taste. So I was never really a fan of his curb stomp. So when he started using the pedigree, I thought it was great.
You've had several personas in wrestling, including David Yale and Jason Gold. Tell me how you came up with the characters, and which do you prefer?
David Yale's definitely the oldest. Originally, David Yale was sort of a different type of character called the Professor. And then we sort of honed that a little bit. So one of the people that trained me, Grayson Gill, he kind of came up with the idea of this guy who had gone to Yale and was, the just does the pure "I'm smarter than you." I don't even want to be in this room with these ignorant wrestling fans type character, and so that sort of evolved, and I really like the character. Um, I'd have to say that he's probably my favorite out of the two, just because that's a character that's been with me for so long. And then the other one is I had been Jason Gold. I had been basically playing as David Yale for a very long time, and just competing as David Yale and sort of this very heelish type character. So I really wanted to kind of change it up a little bit and sort of it's just try playing like this kind of white meat fan favorite babyface type character. So that's where Jason Gold came from, with the flashy gold shiny pants. And for the theme music, I really like the theme song that the TV show Entourage used for their entrance theme. I thought it was exciting. You'd hear that theme come on, and you just get excited. So I was like, this is make great entrance music. Well, my favorite character on that show is named Ari Gold, and so that's where the last name Gold came from. I picked Jason because I just thought it sounded good. I just thought Jason Gold was kind of a catchy name, catchy moniker there. So, and not to say that I don't like playing that character. I'm just a lot more comfortable, I think, as David Yale. It comes a lot more naturally to me. It's a lot closer to my actual personality.
Do you believe entrance music plays a big part in a wrestler's career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I think it's huge, and I think that I think it's overlooked. You'll see a lot of guys on the indie circuit, and I say this from my experience as both a performer and also as a booker, that you'll see a lot of guys that'll come up this production desk and they've got a song on flash drive, or they'll send some music in, and then it's the song either doesn't fit their character, or you're thinking, how is anybody going to come out to this and have it make sense? And a lot of times, guys will pick something that they personally like, but it doesn't actually fit them as a character. They're just kind of picking a song that they think sounds good. And that's really one of the worst decisions you can make, because honestly, when you pick your entrance music, you want it to make your audience feel a certain way. So, once you go through that curtain, everything that you do is designed to elicit an emotion from the audience. And so your entrance music is really the first thing that they're going to hear. That's their sort of introduction. That's their first impression of you when they hear that music come on. So whatever that music sort of instills in them, whatever emotion that music, that song gets across to them, that's what they're going to be feeling when you hit that curtain. And so it's very important to me. I think it's a huge part of any character.
What made you choose Requiem the Fifth for David Yale?
Well, with a character like that, I think the sort of classical music just sort of sets the tone for that character. Sort of, it's this sort of pompous, arrogant, using the classical music, it just sort of elicits that sort of elitist vibe, from the character. And then on top of that, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra version is just awesome. It's very modern. It's a very modern take on a absolute classic. So I think it works a lot better than just the original Fifth Symphony, because it's got sort of that edge to it that sort of fits with professional wrestling.
More on to another side of your career. How did you get into production?
Oh man, so I've always sort of dabbled in it a little bit. When I was younger, I would sit there and download like Shawn Michaels matches or Undertaker matches or Kane or Shane McMahon or just any of those that I could get my hands on when I was a teenager. And I would download them, and I would go into Windows Movie Maker and just sort of take a song that I liked and make a sort of a highlight video out of matches that I also thought was great. And I would just do this in my spare time. And so as I got older, I sort of honed that skill and got an opportunity at Flatline Pro Wrestling to sort of explore that a little bit. Now, at Flatline Championship Wrestling, um, you know, they actually had some entrance videos as well, and I made some entrance videos for them that were just very basic back in like 2006, 2007. But then Flatline Pro Wrestling in 2012 was when I guess I really got to sink my teeth into it. And we started doing entrance videos for the entire show, doing build-up videos for big matches at big events and things like that. So that was sort of the beginning and the end of that to where I'm at now. It's just ever since I was a kid, I really liked just putting that sort of stuff together and learning how the software worked to be able to do that and just trying to become really good at it. So it's something I've always enjoyed, and I think the production side of wrestling, I think it gives any show a huge edge, because I think production is really downplayed on the indie circuit. Either a lot of promoters don't understand it, or don't have the resources to do it. I think a lot of promotions would like to, but it's just the matter of finding the right people to be able to do it, and in some cases having the budget to do it.
You mentioned, you were doing production for Flatline Pro Wrestling, but I also heard you were on a very tight schedule with that. What was it like doing production for them?
Well, I mean, to be honest, sometimes it was a nightmare and sometimes it was amazing. There would be times where we would finish a show and legitimately I'd have 1 week to brainstorm ideas for the next show, and we would book it. We would spend an afternoon on a weekend, probably 6-7 hours, booking a show. And then after that, pre-production would start. We would have sometimes 5 or 6 new guys that would come in, so we would make unique videos for each one of those guys. We would have a recap video at the beginning of the show a lot of times that would catch everybody up on what was going on if they had missed a couple of shows. And then any big matches that were taking place for that. So sort of a timeline of what it looked like is first Saturday of the month, we'd have a show. Immediately I would get that footage and start working on picking the matches apart, pulling out good clips, to use later on. We would book the next event. I would have 3 to 4 weeks, depending on, how many weeks were in that month, to prepare for the next show, and then we would do it again the next month. So it was never ending. I'd say that there was probably a year or so out of the 4 years that Flatline Pro was around, where I worked on it pretty much every weekend, every day of every weekend for probably a straight year, where we spent a ton of time making sure that show was going to be as good of an event as we could possibly put together every month.
Which version of Flatline did you prefer, FCW or FPW?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would have to say definitely Flatline Pro Wrestling, because it was much more of Flatline Pro Wrestling was pretty much, it was just something special and something unique on the independent scene. So with Flatline Pro Wrestling, I mean, it was really just a modern take on what we all thought was the most entertaining time in wrestling. So for me, that probably would have been like a late Attitude Era, sort of Invasion era. And so that's kind of what we tried to recreate, was that sort of environment and those types of stories and that sort of unpredictable atmosphere. So, if you came to the show, you didn't know what was going to happen. Somebody might get jumped backstage on the way to a match, or somebody might pop up on the screen and challenge someone in the middle of the match, or distract somebody, or someone might run through the crowd. You never knew what was going to happen. So we wanted to, keep that feeling of excitement going. So I think I would have to go with Flatline Pro Wrestling. But not to discredit, Flatline Championship Wrestling. I did spend a lot of time there. And got a lot of great experience and really got to work with a lot of great talent. But Flatline Pro was just unique, among wrestling.
One thing I noticed in both versions of Flatline is that David Yale was always Daniel Main's assistant. Was that planned out, like, or did you want to be his assistant?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a really awesome story. So, if you were a fan and followed it from the days of Flatline Championship Wrestling, you could look at that relationship, sort of Daniel Main brings David Yale into the wrestling business in sort of 2005, 2006. I won Flatline Championship Wrestling's Rage Division title and had about an 8 or 9 month reign with that, with Daniel Main as my manager. So you've got David Yale and Daniel Main here, you've got this sort of corporate owner type character, and then you've got his apprentice who is also a wrestler. So it was a pretty interesting dynamic. After I lost the Rage Division Championship, we sort of split apart, and later, I would leave Flatline Championship Wrestling. And then if you fast forward to Flatline Pro, we had that really interesting show, which was my first appearance at Flatline Pro Wrestling, where Daniel Main sort of reintroduced me to the crowd. And there were a lot of people there who remembered Flatline Championship Wrestling, and so they understood who I was and what I was doing there, basically. They understood that relationship between Daniel Main and David Yale. So that was really cool. We always sort of went back and forth. We did we did the angle where I ended up having to be his servant or whatever, because I lost our Team Yale versus Team Maine elimination tag match. So he had me cleaning the bathrooms and mopping the floors and things like that. So it was a very interesting sort of up and down relationship, all the way up to those very last moments of Flatline Pro there in the cage, where we just sort of had shared that moment of we've had this long, almost 10-year long road ahead of us. So that was great.
Tell me about the Rapture. Who came up with that?
Oh, well, I would say the original discussion of the Rapture was with Anthony Henry, Chris Wiggins, and myself. And of course, once the idea was brought up to the booking team, basically, of course, Casey contributed her ideas, Daniel contributed his as well. And then, once we actually got the team formed, with it being myself, Damon Rashad, Scott Mason, and Anthony Henry, once that team was formed, everyone sort of contributed ideas. And then later on, we brought in Shane Hexon, as you know, and then he contributed a ton of ideas too. So that dynamic sort of continually changed. But the original discussions were between Anthony and Chris. And then when they brought me in on it, it just sort of steamrolled from there. So sort of the end product that you got was a collaboration between 8 or 9 different people.
Did you enjoy running the gimmick in the Rapture?
Yeah, I had a blast. I learned a ton of things from Anthony during that time frame. I learned a ton from Hex during that time frame. And what was really great about that is, if you look at the people we were across the ring from, I mean, it was basically a who's who of talent at Flatline that wasn't in the Rapture. I mean, I got to work with Jacoby Boykins. We got to work with the Fireman. We got to work with Brandon Parker. We got to work with Ken Lee. And then we got to work with people like Adrian Davis and J.C. Walker. We even got to work a little bit with Cedric Alexander. We interfered in a match that he was in, Aaron Epic. As you know, we interfered in a match and got to work a little bit with Shane Helms at Fall Brawl in Thompson, Georgia. So all of these different people we got to work with, I really learned from them and got to sort of get a new aspect of the business from those people. So that was great.
There was also another faction in Flatline, the Galeno family, and I know a lot of fans have been asking about a dream match between the Rapture and the Galeno family. From your experience as being as a booker, do you think that could ever happen?
I feel like the chances of it are very slim. Basically, the last March of Champions coming up sooner than we, really were prepared for. I think, there just wasn't room for it. There wasn't really room for it to make sense. And if we were going to do it, we wanted it to make sense. And sort of the different pieces would have had to have been aligned in just the right way in order to make it happen. Is there still some buzz about that match? Maybe. I've talked to Mikey Galino personally about it many times. It always gets brought up, on different road trips and things like that. So I will say that I think that there are people that want to see the match. Do I think that it will actually get booked and happen? Probably not. There's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle, a lot of different moving pieces. So if you look at the talent involved on both sides of that, so you've got Galino family, you got Oz Knight, Wade Adams, you've got Rob Killjoy, you've got James Drake, and you got Mikey Galino. I mean, there's a lot of talent just in those 5 names. And then we already went through who was in the Rapture. So not only do you have to get all of those people into the same building at the same time, even if you can work all that out, you've got to do it in a way that's going to make sense. So I think I wouldn't hold my breath, but if it did happen, I would definitely be interested in being involved.
What is the best promotion you've worked for?
I would have to go with Flatline Pro. I mean, it's just, I could go on and on about how incredible, how unique it was. I think that anybody that worked there consistently understood that we did things differently. And so I would have to easily say Flatline Pro. But I have worked at probably 8, 9, 10 different places, and most of them were pretty good experiences. There have been some different promotions, different bookers that you wouldn't necessarily want to go back and work for again, but I'd say on the whole it's been a pretty positive experience. But if I have to pick one, it would be Flatline Pro.
What are some of your favorite opponents and guys you've worked with throughout your career?
Well, let's see. I've always had great chemistry with Charlie Anarchy and Oz Knight. Known those guys for a long time. Same can be said for Damon Rashad. We've had some great matches as tag team partners. We've had some great matches as opponents. I'd have to list Brandon Parker here. We've had a ton of matches with each other. As a matter of fact, I faced him in my very first match at Patriots Park, and then I got to face him again years later in War Games at the same building. So that was awesome. He's definitely one of my favorites. I like working with Ken Lee. David Coleman and I have some amazing chemistry with each other. Also, I would have to say the Fireman. I think that we both bring out a very interesting aspect of each other, just sort of with the different personalities. I'm a talker, he's a talker. And, I usually come out on the worst end of my encounters with the Fireman, but it's always a ton of fun.
If you had the chance to face anyone on the independent or professional level, who would it be?
Well, so that's a bit of a loaded question. So if I was in, like, the shape that to do it, so if I was in good enough shape to keep up with Anthony Henry, I would have to say that he would be my choice opponent, just because I've watched him sort of evolve over 3 or 4 years. I've been in the ring alongside him as part of the Rapture, and every time I see him go out there, he tries to step it up another level. So I would love to know what it's like to go with Anthony Henry and sort of just work with him in the ring. If I had to pick a close second, it would probably be Shane Hexon. As frightening as I think that might be at certain times, he's one of the most intense people out there, so I would love to compete with him as well.
The last time we saw you in a ring as a competitor was at a Livewire event in December. Is this a sign that you're hanging up the boots?
Well, actually, sometime I think in 2013 or so, I officially retired as an active competitor. So, when I made that decision to retire from active competition, basically I stopped going on the road, stopped going out and looking for bookings as a wrestler. Now, I didn't have really the time to do it because I was focused on making Flatline the best show it could be from a booking and a production standpoint. So I really didn't have the time to go out and travel like I had been doing. So really, it was just about priorities there. So I'm not saying that I'll never come back for another match, or that I wouldn't consider going back active if I got in the right shape. But for now, unless something changes, I don't. That may have been my last match at Livewire. I'm satisfied with it. So I'm really at that point where if I didn't have another match, I would definitely be happy, with the run that I've had.
I know you and I have had discussions about this in the past. If it was ever possible, would you ever consider facing Justin Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if the right circumstances were there, I would definitely be interested in having a match. So if that's the way the cards fall, then I'll be there to lace up the boots.
I've also heard some buzz about this new promotion starting up. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I actually, I'm assuming you're speaking about Viral Pro Wrestling, VPW. And we just recently announced that first event's going to be on August 13th of this year. Sweetwater Gym in Thompson. I'm super excited about that. So hopefully I'm going to be lending my booking and sort of production talents to this promotion as well. So I'm very excited to see just what we're able to put together for this first event. I think it's going to be great. There's going to be some big match announcements coming out. So I mean, it's definitely the promotion to pay attention to. I think that when Flatline Pro Wrestling closed down, that left a void in the CSRA. So I think if anybody is going to pick up that momentum and run with it, it would be Viral Pro Wrestling. And I think it's going to be a different take on independent wrestling than you see at any of the other promotions around here.
Do you know who's actually in charge of that promotion?
At this point, I'd rather not say. So I want to keep that sort of under wraps, but I can tell you that it's in good hands.
Well, Caleb, we reached the end of the show. I mean, it's been a pleasure having you, but before we go, I've got one more question for you.
Sure.
Is there anything you'd like to say or any advice you'd like to give to any newcomers in the business?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing I would say is listen. You need to bring your own input to the show, but if you're breaking into the business and you're in a locker room with veterans, then listen. If you're not in a locker room with veterans, then you're not in the right locker room. Try to always be at a place where you can learn. Don't settle for being on a show where you're at the same talent level as everyone else, or you're at the top of everyone else. So if you're better than everybody else on that show, then you need to be on another show. So that would be my biggest advice, is surround yourself with people that you can learn from and learn from them.
Well, Caleb, it's been a pleasure having you here on the Spotlight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me anytime.
And I'd love to have you here in the future, possibly again on another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as we get closer to sort of Viral Pro Wrestling kicking off and having their first show, I'll definitely have more to say around that time.
Do they have any social media pages we can reach them at?
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter and Instagram at Viral_Pro, and then also on Facebook you can search Viral Pro Wrestling and find it on there as well.
Alright, I'll have to look into that. I actually look forward to being there.
We'll see you there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been The Spotlight, and I'm your host, Justin Hollywood. As always, I will see you next week for another edition. Thank you.
This has been a WWAX production.